Well, and as we've been saying, today marks exactly 6 years since Senzo Meyiwa was brutally killed. And I have with me now Ziyanda Ngcobo, and who is our senior politics reporter. And she is going to tell us about the journey traveled thus far. And I can only term it that, Ziyanda, a journey traveled thus far, in particular for the Senzo Meyiwa family. You've had a number of interactions, but before we get there, tell us about this upcoming media briefing. We understand it's the police minister,
yes,
Begicele, alongside his national commissioner, Ketlas. What are they talking about?
Most certainly, Xoli. So at 1 o'clock, we're expecting the police minister and the national police commissioner, Ketlas, to brief the nation really on what is happening regarding the Senzo Meyiwa case. You'll remember that last July, Cele had announced that there was going to be a special unit that's to be established to deal with this murder case related to Senzo Meyiwa. And in fact, that's what he told the family when he went to the family home when Sam Meyiwa, Senzo Meyiwa's father, had passed away. And you'll even recall that at the time, the Meyiwa family was saying that the reason why Sam Meyiwa even passed away was because he was so stressed about the lack of developments that, in relation to his son's murder. And the family maintains that the murderer of Senzo Meyiwa was inside that Vosloorus home in 2014. So it's going to be very interesting to hear what the police minister says, especially since last week there was, of course, that News 24 report which was saying that the murder weapon used to shoot Senzo Meyiwa has been found. It was at a Cleveland police station, and in fact that there is a suspect who's already been convicted to 30 years in prison for the murder of Alexandra taxi boss Reggie Muhlala. He's also responsible for the murder of Senzo Meyiwa. But I can tell you, Koli, last Friday I sat down with Meyiwa's mother, Ntomfuthi Meyiwa, and she says all of that is lies, and we are going to air that interview at 8 p.m. this evening here on Channel 405.
So you're bringing us the very latest, Ziyanda, yes. But I want to take us back.
Yes. And
I want to take us back to last week. Let's take us back last week, where we happened to speak to Ziyanda Ngcobo, that's yes, Senzo Meyiwa's cousin.
Yes.
And you could hear in his voice, very stressed and very angry,
yes,
about why this remains unresolved, and in particular, the lack of updates, as far as what he told me, lack of updates from the police to the family. But he also had something very interesting to add, didn't he?
He definitely did, Xoli, and he even mentioned a specific name, Longwe Twala, as the person who shot and killed Senzo Meyiwa. So certainly it's an interesting development. If you juxtapose that, of course, with that News 24 report, they are saying this is completely untrue. And let's actually reflect then, Xoli, on what Ziyanda Ngcobo had to say.
All right.
Njengamanje kumele engabe abopha uLongwethwala for killing uSenzo. Senzo was shot by uLongwethwala. There was no one who entered the house. Bese ebopha all these police who have defeated the ends of justice.
All right, and I want us to continue the discussion around Senzo Meyiwa, and I want to take you back to the events that unfolded. I think we're going to take you back to the day of the sad news that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. You've put together a very nice, I can only call it a graphic.
Yes. And
it's basically the events that took place, starting on the day before, which was the 25th of October 2014.
Most certainly, Xoli. So, of course, it was on this day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. But, I mean, on this Saturday, it was a Sunday then, of course, at the time. Yeah. Senzo Meyiwa's last match was during that Orlando Pirates versus Ajax Cape Town match. And then, of course, on this day, then Senzo Meyiwa was shot in the back. during what has been described as a scuffle at his then girlfriend Kelly Khumalo's home. The story at the time by police has been that there were intruders who entered that home, and this is very important to mention because it's that particular fact that's in dispute, because 7 people were in the house at the time, including Kelly Khumalo, her mother, her sister Ziyanda Ngcobo, Longwe Twala, and her 2 younger siblings. Now then, Meyiwa is later declared dead at the Butchelong hospital in Vosloorus. So this is where it begins. And then 2 days later, the then National Police Commissioner, Ria Piecha, announces a special task force set up to catch the killers. So there have been many task forces set up to catch the killers. A day later, then, the police, in an unusual move, actually posted an identity kit on Twitter with the face of a man who they believe, the suspects, 2 men, believed to be involved, and they actually put up a 250,000 Rand reward for any information.
And that identity kit, Ziyanda,
yes,
it led to someone being arrested.
Yes.
What then happened? Do we remember what happened to that individual?
So certainly then, I'm taking you there, Xoli. On the 31st of October 2014, a 25-year-old man, Zanoguhle Mbata, he's then arrested after police received tip-offs, and then he appears in the Boksburg Magistrates Court. But then when he did appear for a second time, the case was dropped. He then went on to sue the state for around 15 million Rand for wrongful identity, because when he appeared, it seemed as though that the authorities didn't have enough evidence to link him to the case. And so since then, Xoli, as you can see, between 2015 and 2018, there's a lot that's been said. I mean, I remember even private investigator Raymond Crouch, rather, he also described the Senzo Meyiwa murder as a cold case. I mean, you had police ministers Nathi Nhleko, Fikile Mbalula, and then now Bheki Cele, all promising that now, we will get to the bottom of the Senzo Meyiwa case, which makes it so important then that today we have that 1 o'clock briefing. What new information are we going to be told by these authorities at 1 o'clock today? It's been 6 years. The family is really unhappy at this stage.
And you talk about the people, the number of people that have led the police since Senzo Meyiwa was killed, and the key word you use in there is that all of them have been saying, now.
Yes.
But the one person who said that, I think a number of times, including when he was recently reappointed to the Ministry of Police, that's Bheki Cele.
Yes.
And at the time, Senzo Meyiwa's father was still very much alive, Sam Meyiwa, but still heartbroken because this case was nowhere near being solved.
And I think the important thing here is that on the one side, if you speak to authorities, they keep saying this issue is complex. It's a very complicated investigation. And on the other side, the family saying this is quite simple. There were 7 people in the house the day Senzo Meyiwa was killed. One of them has to have known something. And it's equally important to mention that consistently over the years, it has been mentioned that the people who were inside the house have been actually quite hostile towards authorities when it comes to these investigations.
How do we know that they've been hostile?
Because there have been several reports, but also the family is saying that as well. And this is why they're even asking questions around why these people haven't been charged, for instance, for being obstruction of justice, for an example, in this particular murder investigation.
And I'm going to interrupt you on that very thought, Ziyanda, because you're taking us back to the very conversation I had with Siyabonga Mia, the cousin, who says, we were called as a family, and we were called by someone who said, Zandi, who was the girlfriend to Longwe Twala at the time, they had been involved in a fight. This was a fight between Zandi and Longwe Twala, and Longwe shot Senzo by mistake.
And exactly, and as I've already mentioned, I've sat down with Senzo Meyiwa's mother, Ntomfuthi Meyiwa. She echoes the exact same sentiment. She's saying, if there were robbers in the house, as the story has gone, the story that police have given to the nation, she's saying, well then, why did my son get a call, Senzo Meyiwa's brother, Sfiso Meyiwa, get a phone call to say, uSenzo udubleke ngephutha. meaning Senzo has been shot by mistake. She's saying there are too many inconsistencies when it comes to this particular story relating to her son's murder.
And very quickly, we need to balance it out before we take us to Senzo Meyiwa and the heartache he suffered. Last week again, responding to the remarks of Siyabonga Meya was Chiko Twala, the father to Longwe Twala, the person who is accused to have shot Senzo. And he says, look, if police are convinced that Longwe did this, why haven't they arrested him? Why have they not arrested him? But he also adds that, look, my son, as far as I can see it, he didn't do this, and the relationship itself, because remember it said that he, Longwe, was fighting with his girlfriend Zandi at the time, and a scuffle between the two of them broke out, and Senzo was shot by mistake. He says the relationship was too new for that to have happened. But we're going to go back to that story, because there are other developments there. Talk to us about Senzo Meyiwa.
So Senzo Meyiwa, of course, you know, he was one of the most vocal people about his son's death and the lack of movement when it comes to his son's case, particularly, of course, because they believed, you know, that the people who were inside the house know the truth and that this entire matter is being covered up. So then on the 29th of July, 2019, then, of course, Senzo Meyiwa dies, and saying that his biggest cry, of course, at the time, was not seeing his son murderers behind bars. The family said, and I remember quite distinctly last year, actually, visiting the family home. That's when Begitele at the time also was announcing that by Christmas, which did not happen, that there would be further arrests, saying that they're really distraught at the fact that he died a very sad man. And then, of course, as I've already mentioned, then Cele went to the family home to pay his condolences and announced then that special investigating unit that would be set up and that arrests would be made soon. So maybe soon is what we're going to hear today.
Yeah.
We don't know, Cole.
And it's interesting that you talk about him announcing that arrests were going to be made soon, because last week when he was confronted at a media briefing in KZN, by among which our reporters were there, he says, I'm not going to respond to leaks.
Yes.
I'm not going to respond to leaks. So perhaps today the police minister is going to talk to us about facts, not leaks.
Most certainly. I mean, he even went as far as saying that the story about the gun should not make news. And so then on the 5th of November last year, I want us to go back, because it's very important that we track this, because whatever the police minister says must also fit into this larger context that we're aware of now, and of course what's happened over the last 6 years. And of course then, in a very unusual move, remember the family announcing that they had been so fed up that they would now approach AfriForum and would be working with Advocate Gerinel in a bid to revive the case and see arrests. And it's important that in 2019, I mean, many people had written off this case, saying that it's a cold case, nothing's been done, and there's not much movement. And I remember at the time, I sat down with Senzo Meyiwa's mother. I mean, she was very upset, saying that the reason why they'd approached AfriForum was because the NPA had done absolutely nothing, despite knowing that this case was open and shut.
Oh, Ziyanda, you've taken us back in time. Look, it's absolutely a beautiful work that you've done here, because you've reminded us of all the, if you want to call them, milestones